The soccer is waking.
Star Trek The Next Generation, the worst episode, the worst, very worst episodes, the most hated, the least liked. They're there. They exist. And in Star Trek The Next Generation, of course, we have 7 seasons, so we can pick from each one, right? Maybe 2. Doing the research for this, I was really glad to see that my episode, My Next Generation, that I wrote, is not among, that I could find anyway, the least liked or the most hated. So that was cool. I was grateful. But here are the top 5, or rather the 5 that most people hate. Going through IMDb, ratings, and articles, the least liked or the most hated Star Trek The Next Generation episodes. Okay, Angel 1, that's Season 1, Episode 14. This was intended to be a commentary on apartheid in South Africa at the time. Instead of using, racial and, the racial conflict, they said, let's flip it around and put it into gender role reversal. It was so disliked by the crew, the cast itself. Patrick Stewart sought to have the sexist nature of the episode changed. And of course, the resulting episode is not that liked at all. I mean, the opportunity to see Jonathan Frakes as Riker kind of bouncing around in like a frilly garment, I guess, might be a draw, but for the most part, people do not like. All right, Justice, Season 1, Episode 8. Wacky episode. I do like, there's this weird vessel, like alien ship. They call it like the Edo God, and the people, the aliens are called the Edo. So Wesley gets very, close to death. The episode is about capital punishment and how that should be handled in a civilized society. Now, the original writer, John D.F. Black, he pitched the story, and then Gene Roddenberry and another writer changed it, and he hated it. Black hated it so much, he chose to receive his credit under the pseudonym Ralph Wills. So when you see that, it's really another writer. And there are some rewards. There's great cinematography. This was one of the first episode to be shot on location. And so there's some great, shots. In fact, it was one of the first to use this location, and they would use it later. It's a water reclamation plant. But like I said, I did like the mysterious ship. You weren't sure what it was. But the rest of the plot and the story is pretty kind of clunky, but great shots, great location shots. Aquiel, Season 6, Episode 13, a wacky one, a strange one. It is interesting for murder mystery, a crime story. So for that, it sort of works, but for me, it does sort of fall apart. It's just sort of plotting. Screen Rant ranked it the 9th worst episode of all time of Next Gen, and then said it was critical. They were critical of the Klingon subplot and described Geordi as pathetic at best and a sexual predator at worst. So, take a look, Aquiel. It also, I believe, has some of the first, maybe only, and then Odo would be the biggie on Deep Space Nine, is morphing. There's a morphing scene, and it's pretty neat. And that, if I recall, was either the first or one of the first on Next Gen. But that's one of the worst episodes in a way, though. Aquiel. Code of Honor, Season 1, Episode 4. This is probably, now I'm going to say it is. It is the most controversial episode and probably the most hated of any Next Generation. It has all to do with a planet, a sort of like, they're like a Bushido code of samurais, almost like a Japanese samurai, except they're all black. It's like an African tribe, the tribal culture. And so most of the cast, I heard that Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker, he called it the worst piece of racist shit. And Michael Dorn said he wished they had not made it, but he wasn't in it, I guess, in any of the scenes. And then Tracy Torme, one of the Next Generation staff writers, called it, quote, quite possibly the worst piece of Star Trek ever made. Doesn't work for me at all. I'd totally agree, but there is an actor. He's one of the lead actors, Jesse Lawrence Ferguson. Really great actor. He's in one of my favorite horror movies, Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter. So if anything, maybe you could enjoy it for his performance. Awesome actor, great voice, Jesse Lawrence Ferguson. And Code of Honor, sadly, though, is probably the most hated Next Gen of all time. And finally, coming in at the worst, or the most hated Next Gen episode is Masks. Season 7, Episode 17. Now, it's a wacky one. I don't like it. I certainly don't like it. I think there are worst episodes. It's so bad, or so badly received, that, let's see, Screen Rant ranked it as the 10th worst of all time. And Empire Magazine said it is the worst episode of the entire Next Generation series. It was chosen technically as second worst because then they had Shades of Grey. That's a second season episode, but that was a flashback clip. So they decided to say Masks. Now, it is interesting. It is a showcase. Masks is a showcase for Brent Spiner as an actor because the plot has him being sort of taken over by this almost like alien virus program, and then it kind of screws and fucks around with the Enterprise. So he starts to reenact, Data starts to reenact the culture, this alien culture. And while I think it is a showcase and it affords him, some interesting moments, it's a little embarrassing too. Some of the acting or the writing or the vibe is just kind of silly and weird. But that's Masks. There are some great moments though around the ship because the alien virus is taking over and weird shit is happening in the Enterprise. So that's kind of cool. But so there you go. I don't know how much you hated these episodes, or you might have liked some, but in terms of ratings, IMDb and lots of critics, they are the worst, the very worst of Next Generation. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you're subscribing. See you soon.